Hi, y'all. Welcome back. Lindsay Shookus is a founder, speaker, and 7-time Emmy Award-winning television producer. For 20 years, she worked as a veteran producer at Saturday Night Live, running the talent department, where she was responsible for booking hosts, musical guests, and cast. Lindsay executive produced Miley Cyrus's New Year's Eve party, was an associate producer on the critically acclaimed television show 30 Rock, and produced NBC's Adele Live in New York City special. In 2015, she was named one of the Hollywood Reporter's up-and-coming execs 35 and under, and has appeared on Billboard's Women in Music list 3 times. Lindsay co-founded Women Work Fucking Hard, a women's community focused on empowering female founders and helping businesswomen develop their careers. As a motivational speaker, Lindsay travels the world talking to Fortune 500 companies, women's organizations, and C-suite executives about leadership, the power of trust, and the beauty of adversity. Lindsay is originally from Buffalo, New York, and studied journalism at the University of North Carolina, Chapel Hill, where she earned her BA in 2002. She's a member of the 2022 class of Henry Crown Fellows within the Aspen Global Leadership Network at the Aspen Institute. She resides with her daughter in New York City. Please enjoy my time with the super cool Lindsay Shookus. Hey, y'all. Let's go there. Lindsay Shookus.
Yes, my friend.
That feels so good to hear. You're the first guest that I actually probably don't know as well as the others. Most of my guests I've known for years. I would put you in the fast friend category.
Absolutely.
I met you through a fellowship that we're both a part of.
Mm-hmm.
You were ready to launch one of your events in Austin, and I raised my hand and was like, oh. But the second I actually talked to you, I was like, it was like fireworks. I was like, oh man, this woman is strong. She's cool. She's funny. She's feminine. She's kind. She wants to lift others up. Okay, this is the sort of woman I want in my life. Like I want her in my life. So I put you in the fast friends category.
Well, the feeling mutual. I will say that it's. I felt the same thing, and also I want to point out, like, there's something really special about the person who raises their hand. You know, like I feel like it's so much easier to be the person who doesn't. Like I presented that to a group of people, and within an hour, I had an email being like, Carla and also our friend Josh wants to help, and just how incredible is that? And it felt so nice. And I felt so lucky to be part of the fellowship. And I felt so grateful to just like get the chance to tell you about it. And instantly you were like, that's me. I'm in. I want to help. And again, I think we have to acknowledge that doesn't happen that often.
Totally. It was really special. And now we're going to go on vacation together. And we haven't even met in person, which is like a trend for me.
I want to point out that it's not like it was like it took you 2 weeks to be like, oh yeah, I'll go on vacation. It was like end of the Zoom. You were like, yes, I'm in. Or maybe I texted you right afterwards and you were like, I'm in. So
yeah. I'm like, where's the link?
Yeah. Where do I pay?
Exactly. I think that's what I said. So
yeah, you
funny.
Did. Amazing.
I'm really looking forward to it. Well, okay. So Lindsay, people may or may not know of you, but they certainly know of your work. And so I want to spend some time. You've really shaped our culture and our society over the last couple decades. And so I really want to take a moment to talk about your time at SNL and what you did at SNL.
I have to stop you for 1 second because it's like when you say like you shaped, I'm like, my instinct is like I helped shaped. You know, like to the idea of like one person being able to take any huge amount of credit at that show, it seems ridiculous because it is, 500 people work at Saturday Night Live on a Saturday. So I helped shape.
Yeah.
Just to clarify.
I totally get that. I get the we and everything. And I also want you to own your part of it.
Mm-hmm.
Is that fair?
Sure. Yeah. No, I've gone on a discovery recently of like trying to receive and be proud and take, not being afraid to be like, oh yeah, that was mine. I'll take credit for that. And by the way, there are some things from SNL that I will be like, I'll tell you this, like Sam Smith, Sam Smith being on Saturday Night Live, no one knew who he was. Do you know who Sam Smith is?
Yes, of course I know who Sam Smith is. Apparently, thanks to you. Tell us the story.
I was in Los Angeles and I was, kind of going through my divorce, or I can't remember if I was separated or I was totally getting divorced, and an agent said to me, "Oh, you have to hear this guy, Sam Smith. You have to hear his music." And luck had it that my next meeting canceled. I was back in my hotel and I listened to Sam Smith's, he had like 5 songs. I listened to him and I was like, "Oh my God. Oh my God." And they're also sad. So it perfectly hit me. And I just was like, I got to see this guy. And so I flew to South by Southwest in Austin.
Small world.
2 weeks later, saw him live, was obsessed, and then came back and I called Lauren and I was like, I want to book this guy in the show. There was only one date we had left open. I was like, I want to book him. It makes 0 sense. No one knows who this guy is. He doesn't even have a song in the US right now, but I want to do it. And to Lauren's credit, he pushed on me for like a day to make sure it was the right choice. And as he said, that I wasn't romanticizing it, which I thought was a fair question. And I came back and I was like, I'm not, and I want to do it. And he let me book him. And I will tell you, I would think anyone at the show would be like, it was just Lindsay, because everybody else was like, who is this guy? And so I'll take credit for that. I'll take credit for Sam.
That is a real moment. And he took off after that.
Yeah.
Cool.
At the time, no one knew who he was. And then 6 months later, 8 months later, he had a bunch of Grammy nominations. I felt really proud. It felt really good.
That's bananas. So Lindsay, for our audience members that don't know, you were a producer at SNL for 20 years, and which meant that you were booking both the host and the musical guests. Is that correct?
Yep. And I was also in charge of finding talent for the cast members, to new cast members on the show.
Okay. So walk us through that a little bit. How does one get that job, for starters? I mean, that just sounds like a dream gig. How did you end up in that job?
I mean, it's really a little bit of a fairy tale in the sense that I moved to New York without a job. And 5 weeks later, I started at Saturday Night Live. I was right out of college, had very, very little show business experience. And, I like to say it's like a little bit of luck and drive. I got an interview to be an assistant at the show. And the woman who hired me was just like, she happened to be looking for someone. We really got along. And that was it. I mean, truly, I always joke on my first day of my first job as an adult, I met Matt Damon. And I remember
Are you kidding me?
No,
that's
and
bananas.
I'm from Buffalo, New York. Look, I'd never really met a celebrity, we were friends with one of the local news anchors. So I was like, what? How is this a job? How can this be? But it turns out it is a job, and actually was really hard work. It just was hard work at a place that's really fun and interesting and a cultural icon. So people think it's really cool.
Wow. Okay. So you started as an assistant, basically in effect to the person that you ultimately did that job. So you were an assistant to the producer. Is that correct?
Yeah.
And how long were you an assistant, and what did that look like? What sort of stuff were you doing?
I mean, I was technically an assistant for 2 years, and it was everything from actually doing assistant stuff like calendar and phone calls and making sure my boss did on all her tasks. And then I was lucky because she saw something in me. I like to think that she saw a little bit of what she kind of thought was in herself. And she just started very quickly had me start being around the talent. She was just like, you're good at this. You can handle this. Let's have you be around the talent. And so she trusted me with that. And I mean, I remember my 3rd week at SNL. John McCain was hosting, and the White Stripes were the musical guest. And my boss was like, it was Friday night, you work really late on Friday nights. And my boss was like, we're going out. And this is 7:30, 8 o'clock. And I was like, okay, where are we going? And she's like, we're going to see Cher. I remember we just went to MSG, pulled up in these incredible Cher tickets at MSG, and we watched Cher right next to the stage. And I remember just thinking again, pinch me, how is this? These are working hours for me, and yet I am here watching Cher kill it at MSG.
Yeah, watching yourself in your own movie.
Yeah. So it was, it was, but I will tell you, I mean, I was working, some days I was working, 18, 20 hours. I used to joke, I lived on 50th Street and 30 Rockefeller is on 50th Street. And so I literally would just walk back and forth the same 4 blocks over and over and over again. And I didn't have a life. That was my life.
That was going to be my next question is, could you have friendships or relationships outside of work, or was everything wrapped up in your work?
I mean, I had, friendships that already existed outside of work, but even those were strained from it. I remember my best friend, Kristen, who's, still my best friend, who you met the other day. I remember her calling me, like her getting frustrated where like sometimes I disappeared, and she was working banking hours and I was working SNL hours and that's hard. And like, and your weekends are gone. Like you can't do the things that people in their 20s do in New York. You can't go to brunch or go out on Saturday nights or Friday nights. You're just working,
Yeah.
So it was hard.
And how were you taking care of yourself? Because you're also young, so that's not necessarily a time in our lives where we're thinking about like wellness and yoga and all that stuff and eating well. So how was your health during that time, and how are you taking care of yourself?
I don't think it ever occurred to me to take care of myself. I wasn't making very much money. So, I luckily was at work all the time. So, if you're at work for dinner, they pay for dinner. So I luckily got to eat like some higher end foods than I would have cooked for myself at home. I wasn't thinking about it. I remember joining the Y because it was the cheapest membership in New York City near my apartment. And if I went there 20 times in the year, I would have been shocked. I was the first one in, I was the last one out. And also all my friends became the people who worked at SNL. So I was there having fun all the time, and when I left SNL, sometimes you'd be like, let's go get a drink. And so, yeah, I wouldn't say self-care was part of my worries when I was in my 20s.
Totally. Okay. So you started as an assistant. You're an assistant for a couple of years. How do you get from that to producing the show for 2 decades? What happened in between?
Well, you work your way up, right? Like I was in a department, I was in the talent department, and I slowly kind of just worked my way up. I was, the talent seemed to like me. And I remember I always give credit to Alec Baldwin. Alec Baldwin hosted maybe my second year at the show. And I remember him like specifically like pulling Lauren aside and being like, this one's special. Like she's a good one.
Oh, wow.
Keep an eye on her, and that's really meaningful, especially because Alec and Lauren had such a close relationship and Lauren trusted Alec. So, little things like that happen and you get enough of them and then the cast members were liking and trusting me. And so eventually you kind of build up where like, you just kind of, they want your opinion on things or, the host is struggling with something and they're like, hey, what is, I remember getting called into Lauren's office when I was like 25 and, being so scared because I was like, oh my God, what? And he just wanted my opinion about what the host thought. And you're like,
wow.
Wait a second, and so, those things add up. And so eventually, it took me, but to be fair, it took me about 10 years to go from assistant to producer.
Yeah.
It wasn't an overnight jump.
Yeah. And how do you think you established that trust? What was it about the talent and the executives that made them trust you?
I've done a lot of like thinking back on it now. I don't think I really had like a set out plan when I would go in when I was in my 20s. I like to think it's a little bit of like growing up in Buffalo and just like, my parents taught me to be pretty grounded. And I think I pretty quickly saw that stardom wasn't all it's cracked up to be. You see people, the struggles and the paparazzi and the high amounts of pressure and the amount that's the focus on your looks and I think I just was really good at being like, they're human beings, and also they're in a really nerve-wracking situation. They're coming into a show. And if you think about what they have to do, they come in on Monday and within basically 5 days, they're going on live national television. Each sketch they rehearse just a few times. Some of these people have never done live TV. Some of them have never done comedy. They're nervous. And they just want to be good, right? They just want to succeed and they're looking for happiness just like the rest of us. And, and for approval and for all the things. And so I think I just had a knack for being able to um, just talk to someone like they were a human being, and also help them through it, help them through, I used to be able to like be honest, not like brutally honest, but be able to be like, yeah, I'm not sure that one's real. The sketch you really like, I'm not sure if that's really going to be great for you. And then they'd be like, well, why? And we'd have a conversation. And sometimes people of the caliber of the hosts that come in are around a lot of yes people. And so
Yeah.
you need someone who's going to be honest with you. So I didn't really have it wasn't a perfect science, but it just seemed to work out.
Yeah. I see a lot of things in you that I would say the things that attracted me to you are probably what attracted them to you, right? So what I'm hearing in all this is you had a tremendous amount of grit. You were hardworking. You were happy to be there. You saw the good in people and were compassionate about it, regardless of the circumstances. And you spoke your mind. You spoke the truth. And that, I can't think of anything that would build trust faster than someone that doesn't always tell you what you want to hear, but tells you how they truly feel.
Well, I think yes, but I was artful about it. You have to be really thoughtful of like, if someone's like, here are my 10 ideas, and you're like, they're all shit. Like
that's not going to work.
You're going to lose them. You'll lose them. And so, I always say it's like artful honesty, and like there has to be a nugget of something that I can like find. This is positive. I'm going to focus on the positive of this part. And then I'm going to say like why this part concerns me. But I was thoughtful about how I handled being honest, because if you're brutal within the first 24 hours of meeting somebody, it doesn't always necessarily work.
Of course, yeah. Especially if they're not used to hearing no.
Yeah.
Okay, so you started off with the story of Sam Smith, which I think is so powerful. But you also discovered the likes of Kristen Wiig and advocated for Kristen Wiig. I just adore Kristen Wiig. I think she's just a genius in all the ways. Tell me a little bit, or tell us a little bit about that experience and what it was like when you discovered talent and going to bat for them.
Well, there's nothing better than like when actually, I only got to do it a couple times, maybe only twice, but the feeling of getting to call someone and tell them they're hired at SNL is like a pretty spectacular thing. Sometimes Lauren would do it and sometimes he'd give it to some of us. I remember I called Vanessa Bayer and told her, and it's like you're giving them the call that changes their life. So it was so spectacular to be a part of it and to be right next to it and see it all happen and unwind. When it comes to finding talent, you see so much stuff. You're just watching, especially when I was like, in my 20s, I was the one who watched all the tapes and then tried to get rid of the stuff that wasn't as good so I can show my bosses the better stuff. And so I just saw a lot. And when I saw Kristen tape, I immediately was like, oh, this is spectacular. Like I just knew it. I was like, she's so special. And the thing about SNL is like, you can see, you see a lot of the same things when they send you tapes. There was a year, the summer of Kim Kardashian, and there's the summer of Trump, and there's the summer of Snooki. I remember Snooki being a big one. And, I'm sure Jennifer Coolidge, I'm sure, still currently is a big one for tapes. And like, so original voices and things you can imagine are new, and you can see them being right on the show. It was instant with Kristen. And I just saw a thing yesterday that Mike Shoemaker, one of the producers who was there, said that Kristen's audition tape, that every single thing she did on her audition ended up on the show.
Wow.
Which is the true mark of greatness. Because sometimes it's funny in like in the 30-second bit, but to make it a sketch on a show and have it air is a whole different thing.
Yeah, totally. Okay, so you said earlier you were talking about, hey, this wasn't just me, it was a we. I'm kind of paraphrasing. And it took a lot of people to put a show together over the course of a week. What made it hum? Like, what were the times that you can look back and think, oh man, we were just operating at our best? And what was it about that team environment that made it so? And were there times when it didn't?
Well, I think Lauren always, he always encouraged people to hire the best, to just literally find the best person. Don't be scared of it. Don't think about somebody outshining you or outshining of somebody else. Just like hire the best. So we really had just the most incredible people who were like, you know, the writers and the cast members but the crew. I mean, the crew was remarkable. If anyone could really understand what that crew does at Saturday Night Live, it's total chaos. And he would never, no other show would ever do it or choose it. So I'm just thinking of like what made it really hum. It was always exciting when you had a really big special guest, like, you know, when you had like Obama come on, or, you know, I'm sure it was like that when Kamala came on this past fall, like when you had someone that like, I mean, but we had Bernie Sanders, we had John McCain, obviously, we had Hillary Clinton came on. So those were always big moments when you felt like it was going to be a moment. For me, it was just like the thing that really got me going was just like the pressure of like, it's all happening, you know, and like, you don't have a choice. Like Lauren always used to say, like, the show goes on because it's 11:30, not because we're ready. And like,
Damn.
you know, so, you know, when you were just like, I mean, people would be running, or like, you know, scripts would be cut in half, or cue cards changing, and everything's just, you know, those were the nights. Those are probably the best memories, when like we would completely change the order of the show and the host would be in the cold open, and then they had, you know, 90 seconds to change into their next outfit. And I remember Melissa McCarthy did that once, and she wasn't supposed to be in the first sketch, the cold open, you know, live from New York, but she ended up doing it. It was a last minute change. And then she had to be into her clothes, hair and makeup as Melissa McCarthy for the monologue, but also was going to fly in the monologue. So had to have a harness and like things hooked. And, you know, when you, I remember watching on the floor being like, how are they going to do it? You know, because I'm not doing that. We've got your wardrobe and your crew guys. And when you saw those things happen, you were like, we make magic. We make magic happen. But it's only because, you know, Lauren always had the best people working there.
Yeah. There's got to be real bonding in that too, because it's like all these little mini crises all the time. So there's got to be super bonding in it.
I would say that sometimes was the hardest, was when there was a really, really smooth week where nothing was going wrong. Sometimes, you know, it felt like a little bit of like an energy letdown, you know?
Yeah. Like you got addicted to the adrenaline rush.
A little bit, you know, like what are we waiting for? Or just like you're waiting for the shoe to drop. So I can remember a couple of weeks we were like, well, there's no problems. That's so weird.
That's hilarious. And was that usually when y'all had somebody on that had been on several times, or when it was somebody that had been on the show before as a cast member, or was there no rhyme or reason?
I will say there wasn't really a rhyme or I can distinctly remember Adam Driver the first time he hosted. It was just a really smooth week. It was just, I think our musical, I can't remember who the musical guest was. I want to say Chris Stapleton, but that can't be right. But it was just smooth. It was like he got sketches written for him that were brilliant. He was great. We didn't have to do a lot of rewrites. A lot of times with SNL, the cold open, you know, the sketch that starts the show is usually topical, it's political. And so that's the thing that gets written last. So if you come out of your read-through, the read-through is where we read about 45 sketches on Wednesday. And if you come out of that read-through and you have a great cold open and you have a monologue already written, then some of the pressure from the later in the week is taken off. And I'm sure that week we had a great monologue. We had a very cold open. His sketches were good. He was good. The musical guest was low maintenance. Like, you know, and then in that sense, you're like, oh yeah, it's just a smooth ride this week.
Wow. Okay. So you're getting us into the sausage making a little bit, which I kind of want our audience to get to hear. So in preparation for a show, does it start on a Monday? Does it start on a Sunday? Walk us through what a typical show prep looks like.
It starts on Monday. And really nothing happens before Monday. It is, you know, a host comes in at like 5:00 on Monday, and then it's kind of the kickoff. We all met them. I was the first person who always met the host. And then I'd introduce them to the writers and the cast and Lauren. And then we'd start. And so Monday was kind of like a little short intro. Tuesday was writing night. So everybody would write. And me and Lauren and another producer or two would take the host and some cast members out to dinner. Every Tuesday night, I was at the same Italian restaurant.
Same meal.
Yeah. I mean, you know, sometimes it was depending, like also like what kind of where I was in my life. So like when I was like getting ready to have to get married, I was eating a very, very clean meal that the waiters always knew what I wanted. And then And then when I was pregnant, it was a totally different experience but these guys knew me at the restaurant. They knew me for so many years. And so Tuesday people would stay all night, very much like a dorm room where like, people could sleep over there. The next day you'll see them in the same clothes. And then Wednesday we do a read through where we would read about 45 sketches out loud in front of a big group. And then at the end of it, we would pick 12 sketches to go into production. And then Thursday, the musical guests would come in and they'd rehearse, and we would start sketches. We'd start rehearsing sketches. And then Friday, any short films that you would have seen on TV. I mean, that's crazy. A short film would be shot on Friday and then edited nuts. And put on TV, basically, 24 hours later. And then Saturday, just rehearse again and the live and dress rehearsal at 8:00, 8 to 10. And then we'd have a big meeting where we'd make lots of cuts and change the order. And then the show's live with no tape delay at 11:30.
Wow. And then did you actually have a day off after that? Were Sundays kind of sacred for the SNL team, or did you actually start to have to do work on your own on Sunday to prep for Monday?
Sundays, well, don't forget, my office was in charge of the parties. So there's a party after each show. After every show at 1 a.m., there's a party, and my department was in charge of it. So,
so that's Sunday.
You would get, even when I was, right before I left, when I was 42, like I remember if I could get out of that party by 3, that was a good night. I was going to parties. When I was pregnant, like really, really pregnant, I was going to parties till 4 a.m. So, it's just part of the show. So you get home at 4 a.m. and pre-kids, I could sleep in later than once I had my daughter, you wake up a lot earlier. And then that would be your day to like get your life together and maybe go to the gym and spend quality time with people that you loved. And I learned pretty quickly. No, I didn't learn quickly. That's a lie. It took me years to learn that I had to like shut out SNL on Sundays. Initially you react ratings and reviews, and you have to read all this stuff as a producer and know what people are saying. And it just was like, it was too hard to read on Sundays. Because of inevitably, like if there was something bad, and a lot of times there were like, people love to hate SNL. So I would read something and it would just take me down a path I didn't need to go. So I learned at a point to just like wait until Monday morning to read stuff and to get started. Like I would not read the ratings email until Monday because I just didn't want to deal with it. I wanted to like give myself a little bit of peace. So, but yeah, Sundays, that was it.
And did you find, just as kind of an aside, but I found this to be the case. Did you find that the media experience wasn't necessarily consistent with the actual experience? Like if you had a magical week and a magical show and then, reviews were not so great, did you find that there were sometimes inconsistencies in that?
Yeah, I think so. I think, when you're on the air, been on the air for 50 years now, it's easier to be tough on things that have been around forever than a new show, perhaps. I don't think people ever really realize like how hard that show is to put on TV. It's so much of television takes just months and months and months, and it is pure chaos. So, and it's like that for a reason. It's like that to be magical. So yeah, I don't think it always encapsulated like the real magic of the show. I don't think we always got credit for it, but that's what the job is, right? The job is that you're going to get criticized and you're going to get praise, and you have to live somewhere in the middle, and not let either of you not get too full of yourself and not go down the like rabbit hole into like, a negative spiral.
Totally. I love that you're telling us stories because one of the things I was self-conscious about is I didn't want to ask you about talent or celebrities because for me, that's not what makes you interesting. But also, I'm one of those people that's just super respectful of it. But I love that you're sharing these stories because they're so rich and they give insight into your experience. I'm curious if there's ever been a case where you met someone where you were either a little nervous to meet them or their reputation preceded them and they surprised you. Were there any people that weren't anything like what you expected them to be?
Constantly, I was pleasantly surprised. And I would say that was more often than not, I was pleasantly surprised, especially if I was getting nervous or, somebody was, had a reputation for being X, Y, and Z. I remember before Dwayne The Rock Johnson hosted in 2008, he had hosted before I had been there, but I had met him and I remember being like, not really looking forward to it and being like, oh, he's going to be like a macho wrestler. And like, I don't know. I just remember thinking like, okay, whatever, I'll just get through the week. Sunday always comes, as I like to used to say. And Dwayne The Rock Johnson was just the most spectacular man. When I tell you, he's so kind and so generous of spirit and like remembers things and he just very quickly ended up being one of my favorites. He's someone who asks questions. I talk about that a lot in my new life of like the power of asking great questions. He asks questions, like things like, what do you want to do? Tell me, just like getting into the heart of not just him, but also me. And then I remember he hosted a couple times while I was there, but I always tell the story about how when I was like a few days away from my wedding, I was getting married and I got this text from Dwayne and I hadn't seen him in like, I don't know, at least 6 to 9 months. And he was just like, but I clearly I was talking to him about my wedding and I was kind of obsessed with what everybody else thought and, not a great thing, but very 29 of me. And he texted me like 4 days before my wedding and he said, hey, I know you're headed into a really special week. And I hope you can forget about what everyone else thinks and find the joy because you deserve it. And, I hope you can just be present. And like the fact that he remembered that, I hadn't talked to him in months and months and months. And he's just an outstanding guy. He's just really lovely.
Yeah. That takes me to my next thought, which is what did your time at SNL teach you about people?
Well, it made me really love the art of discovery. I think Google has made it's like taken discovery away, of like we like Google someone and then we make a decision of what somebody is or who somebody is based on what we read. And so I don't Google many people in my life ever because I just so prefer curiosity and asking questions myself. Because what I realized was like what you were fed in the media, what you were fed online, it just oftentimes wasn't an accurate depiction of who they really were. And so it taught me to be really open-minded. It taught me that life is not black and white, that someone can be complicated, someone can be anxious and nervous, but also talented, but also like going through a hard time. Like I just taught me that everything's kind of in the gray. And what a great thing to learn, in your 20s, to give people the benefit of the doubt, my partner likes to say like the idea of assuming good intentions, like what if we just assume everyone has good intentions? Like they're all here for good. So it totally shifted the way I looked at people, especially people of public figures, people of note.
Yeah. One of the questions I typically ask people when I meet them for the first time, in particular in a business setting, I'm like, what is your non-LinkedIn, non-Googleable bio? Like, I want to know who you are. Like, I don't really want to know all that stuff. I really don't care about. And I'm the same way. In fact, when I went through the Henry Crown Fellowship, I intentionally did not read people's bios because I didn't want to find myself intimidated or making any preconceived notions about who did what. I just wanted to get to know the essence of the person before actually. And then I went back and read it and was like, oh shit. Then I was intimidated. But it was funny because I did it after the fact. I wanted to really get to know everyone in terms of who they were at first.
I mean, that's impressive. And I think the fellowship really encourages that kind of like attitude, right? In fact, I don't think I've ever read my fellows' bios. I probably should now, having gone through the program. But I love that, right? I love that like my classmates are still discovering things about me. Like I think that's really, really special. I mean, what would you say is the number one thing that's not anywhere online has to do with business that people wouldn't know about you?
Oh shit. I mean, there's so many things.
Turning the table, baby.
Yeah, there's so many things. I think one of the things, and actually it was one of my Henry Crown fellows, whenever they would come to my house. So my love language is hosting. Yep. And we have like had a constant parade of people coming in and staying with us, like to the point where my daughter used to joke when she was little, like she had no idea who was going to pick her up from school in terms of who would be in the passenger seat with me. But whenever somebody would show up, they would immediately be like, what is this? Like they had no idea that I was into design. And
Mm.
I'm an architecture school dropout, but I don't lead with my design side. I was, at the time that I was in the fellowship, I was like tech executive. That was that was kind of my identity. And I looked the part, and so it would shock people. That's something that people would shock. And it's not really like out in the open how much I love design and art and beauty and just enjoy that so much. I think more and more I'm letting that side of myself out, but only the people closest to me know that about me and wish that that was my job, And so it's kind of funny.
What
Yeah.
a fun, what a fun thing to be able to lean into. And also what a fun surprise to give people of like, look what I'm good at. That's
Yeah.
really cool.
Yeah. They totally don't expect it. Okay. Now I want to peek into your heart, girl.
Mm.
I want to talk about how you became so fucking cool. Like, tell me about little Lindsay.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Lindsay. Well,
little
my mom-
Annie Levin,
Oh my
Annie Levin
God.
Lindsay.
Annie Levin. Lindsay. I mean, my mom would say I came out like this. She would say that like I came out a little producer. I just was, always creating shows and, productions, and I had all these female cousins and I was the oldest. So I was tough. I made everyone rehearse. Everyone had jobs. I mean, I loved being creative, and I just came out a little producer. I did. And I loved performing. So I leaned into that. I was definitely like a theater kid. I did the sports too, but I was a theater kid. And I was also like president of too many things, my mom and I, it wasn't funny at the time, but when I was so involved and I put so much pressure on myself since I was such an early age that like, I remember my mom and I it was like I was getting ready. I was president of the class and we were getting ready for homecoming. And there was the whole like every class has a float in the parade, and whoever win, it's all about winning the float contest. And my parents' basement was like the center for where everything was done. And I lived right near the high school. And there was one night where like I was just up till like, 2 a.m. doing things for the float by myself. And I remember my parents were like, came out and like, it's time, Lindsay. It's time for you to go to sleep. And I just was like, no. And I like held on to the ping pong table on which I was like making crafts for the float. And they like really had to like drag me upstairs. I definitely like had a bit of a like, yeah, I put so much pressure. I definitely so much pressure that I went through a period where I actually felt pretty sick in high school and did all the tests for all the things because we were like, well, something must be wrong. And no one brought up the fact that it was probably like anxiety. And then, I'd say about a year and a half, I mean, literally every single test to the point where I was like, hoping that I would get a diagnosis of something because I felt so sick. But the problem is when you feel that kind of sick and it's not cancer and you don't have a diagnosis, but you really feel sick every single day. No one really gets it. And it's hard for people to understand you. And so, yeah. And then finally I think my mom was like, hey, maybe it's anxiety. And so I finally went on some anxiety medication when I went to college and it like totally saved me. But I say all that to be like, I just always was putting pressure on myself, always, not wanting to let people down. I was, MC, I spoke at my graduation. I was just always kind of front and center in front of everybody and in charge. And I loved it, but I loved it so much that like, it definitely hurt me at points.
Like to a fault. Yeah.
To a fault, for sure. It was like, and I had this realization when I was in college or maybe after college that, when you think about pressure on kids, right, you're like, oh, well, you're just assume it's like their parents, your parents. And my parents really, they weren't like get straight A's or, it was me. It was like, it was just me. It was within me. And I'd say like that's something that like has always been part of my journey is like managing that, like that bit of monster that can push you a little too far, Luckily I've done a lot of therapy now and I've really worked, not that it's completely gone, but I've done the work to like, make friends with it.
So I always say any strength ungoverned can take you down.
Yeah.
And so I can totally relate to what you're saying. And it cuts both ways because it seems like that anxiety served you. It was energy to a point
Sure.
until it didn't.
Yeah.
So when you got to college, were you able to manage it then once it was medicated? Is that how you started? Or you mentioned, or what other things did you do, or what have you learned to manage it?
Well, the truth is, like, it wasn't like I was like, oh, this is anxiety, and anxiety I am feeling. It was like, it was coming out in like physical symptoms. I was like, my vision was blurred. My stomach hurt. I was having headache. Like I was,
oh goodness,
I was physically feeling anxiety. It wasn't like I was like, well, boy, how do I handle this? Like my heart racing and this tension in my chest. It was like, it was just coming out in physical symptoms. The medicine worked. I didn't really think about it again. I just was like, okay, that's done. And I do remember going to college and being like, you know what? I'm just going to be regular. I'm going to go to college.
I'm not going to be the boss of everyone.
I'm not going to be in charge. I remember saying, like, I went to UNC Chapel Hill and I was like, I didn't know anybody. So I was like, okay, here's what I'm going to do. I'm going to go to college. I'm going to study. I'm going to make great grades. And I'm going to join a sorority. And that's going to be it.
How long did that last?
Wait, the best part is that I actually told this to Tanya the last seminar in the fellowship, and she really hooked onto this one. The best thing is that at UNC Chapel Hill, the sorority rush thing starts before school even starts. I knew nothing about it. I was just like this like innocent girl from Buffalo who was wearing like a denim jumper, and like Keds, and I was like, I'm going to get in because of my personality. And it's a really competitive system. I just had no idea. And I ended up, they called me on the day where you're supposed to find out where you're going to sorority. And they're like, don't show up because you didn't get in.
Oh, shit.
And it was like day 10 at UNC.
Oh, Lindsay.
And my roommate went to go to her sorority, my roommate Mercedes. And I just laid in bed and cried. And I was like, I'm not going to have any friends. And I'm just a loser, and so all of a sudden my plan to like do nothing, well, I definitely didn't have much on the schedule because I didn't really, and the way I made friends was always like groups and things. And so it just like totally took a turn for me, day 10 at UNC.
Boy, didn't those girls miss out. Holy smokes.
Well, don't worry. I got into sorority next year. And then I, of course, became president of sororities.
I knew it.
Don't worry.
The reason I said it is because I told myself a similar story. So I ran myself into the ground running restaurants and bars. I put myself through architecture school running restaurants and bars. And so I literally, it sounds a little bit like your life at SNL. Like I would go to class at 8 a.m. and then by 3 p.m. I was at the bar. I'd work the shift at the bar. I was home at like 4 a.m. and then I would sleep, take a nap, go back to school. And it started to show up in my health. So I started to have seizures. And because I wasn't getting enough sleep. And so when I got my first job out of the bar business, like my first quote unquote real job, when I was in the corporate world, I told myself, it was at Dell, it was in technology, it was tech sales. I told myself, I'm not going to do a damn, I'm going to be a salesperson. Like, I'm not going to run this thing. 6 months in, I was leading. It was like, it took less than 6 months before I was moving up. I was off to the races. Same sort of thing. You know what? You were saying that your mom said that you came out as you are. I feel like my kids, and I'm wondering if you feel this way about your daughter, my kids came out who they are, like from the moment they were born. My daughter, she used to kick me in utero. I used to call her Kung Fu baby. And that girl knows what she wants in this life. She is a total ass kicker. And my son, is just loves a good time. And he used to dance in utero. Like if I played music loud enough, he would move to the beat. And when I brought him home from the hospital, the first thing I noticed is his little baby foot would move to the beat of the music when we turned on music.
Oh my God.
Like the first day, his little baby foot would just, and he's still
and you were like he's got rhythm.
Totally. Yes. I'm like, check. You're exactly right. I'm like, the boy can move. He's got his Latin roots.
Yeah.
But yeah, so I'm curious if you feel that way about your daughter. Does she come out who she is?
She was too, same thing. She was a fighter in my belly. She did in some ways, and it's funny when I think back to who she was, like at the tough years of like 2 and 3, and she was like, really stubborn, and I don't know. Maddie has really surprised me because she's she's such a sensitive and kind kid. Like she really is just, and I don't know if you would have told me it, if you would have asked me at 2, would I have been like, oh, cause she was wild at 2 and 3. And she's a kid. This is a sweet story from, right before Christmas where I was, stressed. I had a lot of work one weekend and I was like, oh my God, tomorrow's, the 23rd of December. I'm like, I like to write. I'm a big handwritten note person. And we have 35 people who work in my building in New York City, and tips and Christmas cards. I like to write each of them a handwritten note. I like them to be individual. And I was like, oh my God, I haven't done these notes. And Maddie goes, Mom, I got it. And my 11-year-old daughter took out the next day and she wrote out these cards, these Christmas cards for all of our doormen. And they were like, and each of them was different. It was like talking about people's traditions and cheer and joy and gratitude. And I'm still in shock that my kid did this. And I don't know if I would have guessed that, when she was little. Now, granted, she sees me writing a lot of notes, so I know she gets that from me. But yeah, I don't know. It's like, it's so interesting to see, to see your kid grow, and she's, one thing we talk about a lot is we both say I'm sorry a lot. Oh, sorry, like, oh, I'm so sorry, like. And so we really are trying to work on that, of like both of us, instead of saying like, it's like, I'm sorry it's taking me a while to get back to you. Just like, thank you for your patience, and switching the narrative. I've learned from my friend Lisa Sun, my friend Lisa Sun talks a lot about not saying sorry. And so, yeah, as a mom, we're both trying to work on that together. Me and my girl.
I learned that hack waiting tables. Actually, somebody who trained me waiting tables taught me that. He was like, never apologize to the table. Always thank them for the grace. And I was like, ooh, okay.
It's a great way to put it. Thank them.
Yeah.
Thank you for the grace. Yeah. That's
great. And that is like stuck with me for life. Okay. So I'm going to contradict myself, because yes, while they come out who they are, the other thing I will say is you can't put your kids in a box. Like you can't like label them a certain way, because they're going to evolve and change. And that's for damn sure. I'm curious. I think we talked about this. Have you done your human design?
No, I don't even know what that is.
Oh, girl. Okay. I'm going to send you the link. I'm calling it. I'm guessing. It's based on astrology of all things. So you need your birth time, which should be on your birth certificate if you don't have it. And you need your birthplace and all that stuff. And I mention it because I'm guessing that you're a manifestor generator, a man generator. And I'm a manifestor. My daughter is a manifestor generator. And so I'm just going to go ahead and put a pin in this. We're going to come back to it, but I'm guessing you're a manifestor generator.
I like the way it sounds. I'm in. If that's me, let's do it.
Yeah. It's like big vision plus get shit done. I'm big vision, but I need to get people in to help me make it happen.
Oh, for sure.
Yeah. So, okay. Now, I want to talk a little bit about formative moments in your life. So you've had this like beautiful existence and all these amazing experiences that people dream of. Now that you kind of look back, what are some of the most formative moments for you? What are the kind of sliding doors moments? I mean, clearly we haven't talked about your marriage, your first marriage.
Yeah. Well, I think my marriage and the breakdown of my marriage and the divorce and then figuring out how to recover my relationship with my ex-husband has probably been one of the most important parts of my life. And also now what I am so proud of, like him and I have just the most special relationship. I mean, we laugh. I mean, I threw a party for my fiance and my fiance was like, we got to invite Kevin, like my ex-husband, like on Christmas Eve this past year, it was, this past 2 years, it was me, my fiance, my daughter, and my ex-husband all in matching PJs, and we all sleep over together. So I'm so proud of that relationship. It really feeds me that we were able to like get through the rocky stuff, and we went through some real rocky stuff. So I think for me, why is it? I met him my first day at SNL. We were both assistants, so I met him at the beginning of like everything. Like literally somebody was giving me a tour the first day, probably right before I met Matt Damon. And he was one of the people I met on the tour, and we just instantly became friends. And but he was just with me. We were with each other through so much stuff at SNL. Our offices shared a wall at one point while we were married, and we had our daughter while we were both there. So we learned we tried to learn how to have a marriage while working together, which is tricky. But I think the biggest thing is really, someone once said to me when I was going through this and I felt so much shame. I mean, just the shame I felt about, it not working out. I really just was like, I didn't have, to be fair, no one in my family has ever been divorced. Like literally, there's like nobody. And so it felt like black sheepish, even though now I look back on it, I'm like, who cares? But it felt pretty bad. But I remember someone saying where I was like, oh, my marriage failed. And they were like, okay, so like, let's just break this down. So we're saying that your marriage failed because you're not together. So then therefore, anyone who's together, that's a success. So success is being together and failure is not. And he's like, I want you to think, and we had a couple people in our lives at the time who, had those marriages of people who live apart, who aren't together, who don't sleep in the same room, who don't travel, who don't really have loving, caring relationships. And so the person was like, so that's a success. Just to be clear, that's what you're saying. And you and Kevin, who's even in our rockiest times got along pretty well. He's like, you guys are a failure. And it kind of just changed the way I was like, yeah, you're absolutely right. Like one of my biggest successes now is the relationship I have with Maddie's dad. And I'm so proud of it. And we really are there for each other. And then also just to go through the cracking of like, I really spent my life trying to be perfect. I really thought I could just, it sounds so silly, but I really thought I could be perceived as perfect. Not like a white picket fence, that kind of thing, but just more of like, I was not going to screw up. I wasn't going to, and I really think the end of my marriage just like totally cracked that open of just like, no, like, learning how to like put myself and my needs and make them a priority, learning to forgive myself, letting go of shame and guilt, and then rebuilding. I remember I did a lot of therapy around my marriage ending. And I was just like, oh my God, I'm never going to date anyone ever again. I'm going to be alone for the rest of my life. And I had someone once tell me, this is really bad advice I got from somebody in show business who once said to me when I was kind of telling him, I was like, I'm struggling with my marriage. It was kind of really towards the end. And he goes, what do you think you're going to be? Like a 35-year-old woman who like goes to a bar and picks somebody up?
What?
I know. Really great advice, huh?
Oh my God, that's brutal.
But those were the things I was telling myself. So, to learn that like, I think I'm more lovable now. I think I'm more layered. I'm more interesting. I've learned more lessons. I'm sorry to my ex-husband, but I am such a better partner now. I am so much better about hearing things that my partner might not like and being able to be like, okay, let's talk through them. Like, as opposed to being like, you're wrong and running out the door. So it's, it was such a hard time. And I look back on it and I wouldn't want to go back there. Sometimes when I hear friends are at the beginning of the divorce or the separation, I feel for them because I know just how hard that valley is, how deep that valley can get. But on the flip side, just how great it can be on the other side. And that is like, you're just kind of like, keep going. Just keep going. You're going to get there. But I wouldn't want to go back to those days. Those were really, really hard days. And at the same time, I remember, so it was like, my marriage is like, we're separated. I'm moving into a new apartment. We hadn't told anyone at SNL. We lived in the same apartment building. So I was moving just 2 floors down. And I was producing the 40th anniversary. That was like, it was basically 5 weeks later was the 40th anniversary. And I was doing the regular show and nobody knew. And I was trying to buy furniture and figure out what was my taste as a new human without anybody else, weighing in. And I was barely hanging on, I would say just barely hanging on. And so when people ask me about the SNL 40th anniversary and they'll be like, so like, oh my God, tell me about it. I'm like, blackout. Like,
don't remember anything.
I've never worked harder. I honestly think it's maybe the hardest I've ever worked in my life. I remember leaving that show. It was 2 degrees. It was the coldest day of the year, 2 degrees. Somehow I got from 30 Rockefeller to the Plaza for the party. I have no recollection of how I got there. It was just like blackout. You just don't, you just didn't, I was just putting one foot in front of the other, you know?
Yeah.
And so it was a really wild time.
How did you get on the other side of that? How did you get from that to, okay, this is one of the big accomplishments in my life, and I have a
Mhm.
fantastic relationship with Maddie's father?
A lot of therapy, a lot of therapy. I had this moment where I realized that I had this like fear of being alone. How I realized it was that I was spending time with people who weren't making me feel good. And I was coming home feeling depleted. And, I would just I was filling space. I was afraid to like come home and not have my daughter. And so I would just like go out for drinks with people who didn't fill my heart. And they in fact made me feel worse. And I remember just thinking like, you have to deal with this. And so I remember like people made fun of me. They're like, you're going on an eat, pray, love. But I like forced myself to go travel for like 10 days by myself, internationally. And it was like the start of being like, let's see what you can do alone. Like, let's see who you are alone. Let's, not putting so much weight. I think I put a lot of weight growing up in like, in being worthy of a man or being chosen by a man. And I kind of did the work to eliminate a lot of that stuff from my life, after we separated, where I was just like, okay, like, what if you're just alone? Like, what if it's just this? Like,
Yeah.
what does it feel like? Who are you? Like, you're kind, you're a good mom, you're good at your job, you've got great friends. Like, maybe, what if it's just this, you know? And I remember having this moment where I was so obsessed with romantic love. Like, am I ever going to have romantic love again? And like, that I like wasn't seeing all the love that was really in my life. That was like these people who were holding me up through all the hard times. Like I had so many great friends and family members who were like my angels, who just held, literally like helped me walk when I couldn't walk. And I was just couldn't see that love because I was so obsessed with like romantic love. And so it was just, it was a mindset shift. It was like,
Yeah.
what if it's just you? What if? Maybe it won't be, but what if it is? And like, how do you become comfortable with just you?
Yeah. Ooh, that's hitting deep, girl. I mean, that's something I can really relate to. Learning to love and accept yourself, first and foremost, is really fucking hard. And this whole notion of like what we think love should be and what we idealize, is tough. And, I also think we're trained our whole lives to be of service and to make others feel better as women. And it occurred to me, you just said it earlier, and it reminded me, it occurred to me in a conversation with a girlfriend, actually one of my Henry Crown fellows in my class, one of my classmates. And we were talking about the fact that typically, men propose to women. So what makes it that they get to pick us? Why don't we get to pick them? It's like Emma Stone's realization in Poor Things. That's what we were talking about. Like, why can't I pick, when she's the prostitute and she's like, how come he gets to pick me? Why can't I pick who I want to have sex with? So,
and we're also fed this idea that we expire, I mean, biologically, you're right. Like, and I'd like to think it stems from that, but it's like this idea of like, well, if you don't get this figured out, you're not going to be, what good are you going to be when you're 45, and it's just like, which by the way, I am so much better now.
Totally.
I am better in by the way, my body's stronger. Like I am so much better than I was in my 30s now, but it's this idea that like, oh, well, women expire. So like, get yourself together because you only have a few years. And like, and that part's detrimental.
Yeah, it's
detrimental.
awful. And it's hard. It's a battle. I started a board of beautiful old women. And because I want to have something to look forward to.
That's so smart.
And so I'll send it to you. And so because I want to get comfortable with the wrinkles. I want to get comfortable with, the beauty and the, proof of life experience. And I want to be a cool, old, funky, I want to dress really weird and have my funky glasses and my giant jewelry and my moo-moos.
Lots of turquoise.
Yeah, lots of turquoise. Very low cut.
Yeah.
But so I want to look forward to it versus fight it.
Mm.
And now I will also say I'm the sort of person, there's a rebel in me, and I rail against any sort of societal constraint. So
Mm.
when you were talking about like having to shed the notion of being perfect, like I could feel my throat tighten up when you were talking about that, because for me, it's like no one else gets to sleep in your bed at night, or has to sleep in your bed at night. No one else gets to decide what's right for you. And so I really rail against, and I hate cultural constraints. Like I'm even like railing against the concept of marriage right now, because I feel like none of this stuff makes sense anymore.
It's the kind of thing that I could have used some knowledge on that when I was younger. I like went and spoke to my daughter's high school last year, and I actually talked about how like even the idea of like life, like you're raised to think that life is like you get this high school, college, job, marriage, kid, it's up and to the right. And it's not, it's just no matter who you are, no matter how hard you try, no matter how good you are, life is not up and to the right. It is not linear. And so I did this whole chart of like how you think it's like this, but really it's just like this whole and crazy thing. And it's like, I would have liked to hear that when I was
Totally.
16 years old. I would have liked to have been like, what I also could have heard is, no matter how hard you try, and know how good you are, there are gonna be someone who doesn't like you. Like,
Oof.
I would have liked to know that, because it could have really saved me a lot of time.
Yeah. And that's on them. It has nothing to do with you.
But it's like, I would have, I just could have used that of just like, because, sometimes you just to let go of people who just aren't meant for you. But man, I made those into like sports. When someone didn't like me, I was like, hold on, let me try again.
I'm going to win you over.
You haven't gotten enough of me yet. And I'm going to run at you again. And it's, man, I wish I could go back and like tell that younger version of me of just like, let it go. It's okay.
Yeah.
You're good. It's fine.
Yeah. To your point of who you spend your time with, I'm the same way. I not so long ago had a friend break up with me, and that never happened in my life before. And my knee-jerk reaction was, oh, I got to win this person back. Like I'm going to do everything in my power to win this person back. And then I was like, what the hell am I doing? And I was talking to my coach about it. And my coach was like, oh, this person just beat you to the punch. They saw it coming. They knew you were about to do it, and they did it for you. And I was like, oh my God, you're right. I felt like crap every time I was with this person. This person made me feel terrible. But it was really interesting that my reaction was, oh, I've got to win this person back. Like I did something wrong.
Well, it's like goodness. Like I'm good if they want to be friends with me. I got broken up with in 7th grade, so by my best friend. So I've
that's
actually
the first heartbreak.
Before.
Yeah,
first heartbreak. But I think what I like to think of with friends is like, I always had this notion of like certain friends are good for certain things, right? Like one is the friend you call when you're sad, and one's the friend you call when you're celebrating, and one the friend who's really deep, and one friend is great to go on vacation with. But just like allowing the friendships to go where they are, and not feeling like my best friend from when I was 10 years old, if we don't talk that much. Okay, we don't talk that much anymore. Like,
right.
We still have we had a beautiful friendship. Maybe we connect once in a while, but letting relationships go where they're taken, as opposed to trying to force them down a certain path. And I have to tell you, I can't, Lindsay from 25-year-old Lindsay would have never let that happen. Lindsay would have been like, no, you got to have all, because it's like this idea of changing, right? Like I always thought, how it's like, oh, I got this thing sometimes at SNL where I was fearful of people being like, she's changed. She went to SNL. She's too big for, she's now
it's gotten to her head.
And the truth is like, it just was so not who I was, but I was obsessed with this idea of like not changing, which by the way is complete bullshit, because of course we're going to change. And of course that show was going to change who I was. How could it not? So that stayed with me. It really it was like nails stuck into me throughout a lot of my 20s. It's just this idea of like, nope, no one will say that I've changed. And you're like, well, that's silly.
Yeah.
Of course you are.
That's a self-imposed constraint. Yeah. But I totally get where it was coming from. I also see the wisdom in it, Lindsay. So while, I recognize that absolutely you're going to change and evolve, and it's part of the fabric of who you are. But I also see the wisdom in that you were trying to keep yourself humble, and grounded.
That came fairly naturally to me, to just be like, it's a little, it's smoke and mirrors, right? Like a lot of this stuff that we put on pedestals in entertainment and media, it's just like, a lot of makeup, a lot of lenses, a lot of, lights. It's like, and so I don't know. I would like to think it's my parents, but like I didn't struggle that hard with keeping a good sense of self and staying grounded. I mean, I'm sure, like, our goalposts always move. I always like to say, so like, who you are at 22, what your goals are. And then all of a sudden you get the goals when you're 25 and you're like, well, the goals have to move again. And so you keep
Totally.
moving them. And that can't help but go into like other parts of your life and some of the material things. But yeah, I just had a pretty good sense that it wasn't all everybody thought it was, you know?
Yeah. Yeah. Okay, so you brought up your parents several times. I want to know what your relationship is like with them now.
Oh my God, I'm so lucky. My parents are still alive. They're in great health. They're in their late 70s. I talk to my mom every day. I talk to my dad usually like he's next to my mom on FaceTime or on the phone. Like kind of, he just chimes in. My mom is, I got it from my mom. She's a helper. She's like the first person when someone's going through something, she's going to write the note. She's going to send the casserole. She's going to go help them. And she does that. She's done that for me, a lot through my 30s and 40s. Like she's always shows up. And you know what? I will tell you this. Something I recently realized in the past a few months is that my parents, in a decent way, have been able to stay fairly open-minded as they've gotten older. I dare to say they're more open-minded than they were 10 years ago. I think I'm part of that because I've just gone through so many things that they kind of have to like a little bit flow with where my life has taken me. But like they're not rigid. And I think they've learned through me a little bit, some of the things I've gone through, some of the therapy I've gone through, they've been open to it. And I'm so lucky that I can have really meaningful and deep conversations with my parents that I probably wouldn't have had, 20 years ago.
Oh my gosh, that's really beautiful.
It's
That's
pretty cool.
super beautiful.
Yeah.
Okay, so now I want to talk about the work that you're doing now because it's really cool. You and your partner Chris have started this organization called Women Work Fucking Hard. And I want to hear about how this became. What are you doing with it? What's your vision?
Well, Kristen and I always laugh because we're like, we just keep finding things we want to do and we keep marching forward. The mission is like, we say that we're two women who help women help women. The idea being like, what if all women became a little bit better at helping women? What if we thought about it a little bit more? What if it was like at the forefront of our brain when we walked into a room or a store, or we're like looking to purchase something off the internet? What if you were like, instead of, so many products that are geared towards women are made by men.
Mm-hmm.
So many. So like, what if you kind of just like spend an extra 5 minutes and try and find something for women that's made by women? It's probably going to be a good chance it might be better because it's made by a woman.
Totally.
But like, you're also then you're supporting us, and you can use your knowledge and your network and your resources and your, as I said, purchasing power and your voice to like lift women up. And when you look at the numbers, when you just look at all these leadership positions and the VC money that goes towards women-founded businesses, it's just like, it's a little bit infuriating. So why not? What if we all went a little bit more out of our way to help the women around us? So that was that's what it's turned into. I guess at the beginning, we thought it was just, I want to throw a party. I love throwing parties. That's like kind of like you with hosting. Like I love to throw a party, a dinner party, a big party, a dance party, any party. I want to throw it. And I had a friend who was trying to grow this business in New York. She was trying to find clients. She was struggling. And I just was like, I'm going to help you. I had it. It was clear as day. I'm going to help her. I called Kristen, who was my best friend I met my first day of college, before I got rejected by the sororities. And she didn't. And I called her and I was like, I want to throw a party. I want to invite 50 different women, 50 women that we don't know that are across industries. And I want to call it Women Work Fucking Hard. She was in instantly. And then it's grown from there. It was, I can say this. We didn't know what it was going to be. And perhaps we still don't have the end goal right now, but it was magic immediately. It was magic because we were putting impressive women who's centered around kindness and generosity into one room and saying like, hey, they'd be like, what's the catch? I'm like, the catch is go find 3 women in this room that you didn't know before and figure out a way to help them. And so it's just changing the way you looked at it. Like, what if, we all have ways like, oh, there's someone I know over here who could help you market your this better. Or like, you need to know this guy because, you should be on Carla's podcast and it's just grown. And now we're in our 7th year. We're going to come do an event with you in Austin, which we're so excited about.
So excited.
And, yeah, it fills my bucket. I'm lucky. I always say, like, my mom taught me to find joy in helping others. So it's been in my blood since I was a kid. And she also taught me to love to throw parties. So like we throw a lot of events. We bring a lot of cool people together. We don't want assholes. Like I'm always like, if you're impressive and fancy and powerful, but you're an asshole, like, I don't know. No thanks. I mean, no judgment, just not for us. And we just bring really great women together and give them tangible ways they can figure out how to help each other.
Yeah. What's really neat, you light up when you talk about it, by the way. I'm sure people have told you this before, but what's really neat about it, Lindsay, to observe is that you're doing it completely on your terms and you're designing what you want. Like to hear you talk about it, the things that you're saying is, these are the people I want to be around. These are the people I want to work with. These are the businesses I want to showcase. This is the sort of culture I want to live in, the sort of world I want to live in. Don't know where it's going to end up. Don't know what the outcome is. I can very much relate to that with this podcast, but this is how I want to spend my time. And I think it's super powerful. And I think the concept is one that's it's going to make a significant impact. It already has 7 years in. I mean, I'm sure you have stories.
I mean, yeah, I got one yesterday. We did a Women Work Hard in Chicago. And yesterday, one of the women in Chicago who helped us kind of plan the whole thing was at another event where like Women Work Fucking Hard got a shout out because we had brought so many of those women together who then went and did this event together. And so, I mean, that is like, I mean, talk about fill your bucket,
Yeah.
And I really think that, I think if I may say, and I say this with like a humble attitude, but I think we found something magical. Like, I think we really have, we've struck magic. And the thing about when you strike magic is that like, I know that if you scale magic too quickly, you lose it.
Oh,
and so I think you have to be really thoughtful and intentional. And so right now, Chris and I have like 8,000 hats, but like, this is one of our bigger hats, but what's cool is that we get to just align together and be like, hey, does this sound good? Does this feel good? Are these people we want to support? Yes. Okay, great. Let's do it together. And no one else has a say. It's just the two of us. We've got a great team who helps us, but like, and so right now that's what we're doing. And who knows, in 2 years, it might be different. We have some cool tech ideas that maybe someday we'll get together. But right now we're just kind of building the community and bringing these kind but impressive women together and having avenues for them to get to meet each other.
Ooh, fun. Well, I would love to talk offline with you about those ideas if I can help in any way.
Great.
Okay. So what else are you doing out in the world? You mentioned that you're wearing 8,000 hats, obviously, with this organization, but you're also speaking. You're serving on boards, if I'm not mistaken. What else are you doing?
No, I'm doing a lot of speaking, which has been, I mean, if you had told me 3 years ago that this would be the things I'm doing right now, I'd be doing, I would have laughed because I wouldn't have been able to foresee them. I mean, that's what's so cool, right? Is that like, you just really never know. You really never know. I remember when I left SNL, a friend saying to me, like, who knows where you could be in 5 years? And like, I think it's important in how I'm saying it. It's not like, who knows where you can be in 5 years? It's like, who knows? Like, it could be anywhere. You might have your own company. You could be in a totally different industry. You don't know. You have no idea. And so to change the way I looked, my perspective at that, so I'd always wanted to speak. I always had loved, being on stage. It was obviously something as a producer I got away from because I was always behind the camera. I just wasn't, people didn't really see me. I wasn't supposed to be seen. So I was in the right spot. But I had this idea that I'm like, I really want to figure out how to build this business. And my friend Naomi, I met a woman 2 years ago who's a professor at Stanford, and we over lunch in LA one day, I said it, and she just was like, yeah, I'm going to figure this out with you. And she had me go and do a lecture at Stanford Business School. And then from there, I just kind of kept building and writing and figuring out the stories. And then within 6 months, I had an agent, and I traveled all over the country this past year. I'm going to New Orleans next week. I'm going and talking to all these, I mean, every industry you can possibly imagine, because one of the main things I talk about is trust and building relationships and the importance of meaningful connection and how you actually do it. It's like I always say, everybody wants to be considered trustworthy, but nobody takes the time to really think, okay, well, how am I going to build trust? What actually works? What doesn't work for me? What does? And how am I going to push this relationship forward based on a solid, foundation of trust? And so I had this talk called the 48-hour best friend. And because at SNL, I felt like I had 2 days to make these, kind of I powered public figures my friend in 2 days. And so I tell stories and then I talk about the power of trust and how we can really build it. And I'm an action person like you, it's like I want big ideas and stories, but then I'm like, I want someone to leave with like, here are 3 ways I'm going to be better at this. And I don't have to totally change who I am. And I've gotten to do it. I'm so proud. It's so cool. It makes me so happy, and it brings so much joy to me, and I get to do it. And it's been the greatest gift. So, and I'm really proud, because it's like, it was something that wasn't there and now it is there. And the only thing I can look back on is like, oh, the only thing that got me from this to this, it's me, you know? And again, going back to the SNL thing, it was 500 people making that show. I've had obviously people who've helped me craft the talks and helped, my agents and my partner and Naomi. But at the end of the day, it's like, it wouldn't be there if I didn't do it. And that's awesome.
So I want to go, I'm so glad you brought this up, because we almost missed it. And I definitely want to go here in terms of, a career behind the scenes and really having to prop others up, to now suddenly you're the talent. You're the one that's out in front. And this is something that I personally really struggle with. But before we go there, I'm going to stick a pin in it, because I think I can hear my audience technically in my ear, figuratively in my ear, asking, wait, we want to know about the 48-hour best friend. So before we move into that, give us 1 or 2 tips that you have that come out in your talks in terms of how you earn trust.
One thing in particular I talk about is we all need to build credibility in relationships. That's kind of the first thing we do in business. But and there's a million ways you can do it. And this is one that I focus on, which is about remembering small details. I just think the power of when you really hook into people, the little things they're giving you, we tend to be a society that's not great at listening. And when you can really hook into these small things people are saying and then remember them and bring them back into the conversation. Hey, how was your vacation? You just went to Japan. You think about what it feels like, Carla, when someone you don't know that well remembers your birthday or your kids' names, or something that you had mentioned offhand the last time you saw them 6 or 9 months ago. It makes you feel seen and celebrated and understood, and it makes you feel special, right? So Absolutely. It's this idea of the power of using those things. And the truth is you have to really listen. And, how do you do that? And then how do you actually take those things and use them again in the relationship? But it's such an easy thing to do. It's so underutilized, and it actually makes you stand out in such a great way. So, and I like to think that's something that I'm pretty good at. That is something that makes me stand out from others.
Yeah, absolutely. In fact, I think that may be one of the other reasons I was drawn to you. You brought it up a few times, and I just want to highlight it in terms of the power of inquiry and asking questions. I work with a coach that teaches a connections course, and all the connections course does is teach you how to ask how, what questions. That's it. And it's a format where it says, okay, you're going to ask questions. He talks about it. It's Joe Hudson, and he talks about view format questions. You ask them vulnerably, impartially, with empathy and wonder. So you're not trying to change somebody's mind. You're not trying to, but you're literally curious. You keep a curious mindset, and you ask them how, what questions. How did that make you feel?
I love that. I love that.
Yeah.
Trying to get to feelings, it's I always talk about how you can say how are you? How have you been to somebody, right? And you're going to I'm good. I'm good. It's a say, or you can say, hey, what's been the best highlight since the last time I saw you? And like automatically you have to get more. And then usually there's going to be a follow-up question to that that's going to get you deeper. And so the idea is to get deeper, is to get beyond surface level. Like, true meaningful relationships are never going to live at the surface. They're just
Yeah.
not. You can't, they don't live at the surface. So yes, it requires vulnerability, which is another thing I talk a lot about in my talk, my own journey to vulnerability. And then how do we actually use it? And yes, great questions. That's the thing I talk about as well, is like, how do you ask great questions? I love what you just told me. That's really, breaking it down spectacularly, but how do you get to the feelings? Get past the things that are at the top and get to the feelings.
Totally. That is my jam. That is totally my jam. And it's why I'm doing this podcast, because I enjoy it so much. Like, I enjoy understanding your heart, understanding how you became who you became, what makes you uniquely you, how you achieved what you achieved, when you fucked up, when you felt like you fucked up, but really didn't. Those are all the things I want to know about you. Okay, so back to the original question that I think is a topic that is one that I'm personally struggling with, to be vulnerable. So I love doing this. I hate the promotion of it. I've spent a whole career behind the scenes propping up brands, and I'm very uncomfortable with seeing my 51-year-old face up close with no filter on Instagram all the time. It's just horrible. I just don't want to promote myself. How did you go from being behind the scenes to the talent? How was that for you, Lindsay? And how did you do it? Because you've done it successfully.
I want to point out, I struggle with that as well. The promotion part, I'm not, and many people in my life constantly tell me of like, you don't put yourself out there enough, with social media platforms. And it's because also I came from SNL, where it's like, that's not what you do as a producer. So that is something that I have struggled with. For some reason, the getting on stages and being out in front of nothing's ever felt more natural to me than like going into that world. I'm lucky because I have people who go and sell me. Like I have an incredible speakers bureau who really, the people there are incredible and they get me out there. I've had to get better at being like, hey, let me tell you about my thing. And like, this is what I do. And this is, and I do, I've started doing some coaching too, and just, going back to like something you said earlier, like formative things. A formative voice that was in my head my whole life was the voice that said, who do you think you are?
Oof.
Who do you think you are? It stayed with me into my 30s, probably late 30s. I've had to shut that voice off. That voice has had to be shut off, just because it's like, that thing of like, I'm doing it now. Because if that voice was still there every day, it would be really hard to be like, oh no, people want to listen. They want to hear you. I got this amazing email with this Excel sheet of all these comments people left in the survey from a talk I did in Las Vegas. It was seven Excel sheets. And it was some of the most beautiful things I couldn't believe. And I couldn't believe they were talking about me. And it was like, I remember just thinking like, I have to like receive this data. I have to receive this. I think as women, we oftentimes, when we hear something good, we're like, oh yeah, cool. Yeah. And we're just like, yeah. But then when we hear something negative, we just like, oh, let me bathe in it and shower and oil it into my skin. And so lately I've been saying to myself, like, you are being given data that you are really good at this. It is your job to receive it. And so it doesn't mean I'm great at putting things on social media. It doesn't mean I still struggle with many things that you were talking about, but I'm actively working to receive the data that I'm being given. Yeah.
Yeah. That's a pretty powerful shift that you're giving our audience, instead of luxuriating in the negative feedback, actually taking the time to receive the positive, because the negative typically isn't even about us.
It's not. And by the way, I also believe in the fact that when there is negative, like, I think there's always something to learn. Like,
there's data.
I really push myself to like go through the painful parts of being like, okay, what is here that I'm going to take away? But I also just, I don't know. I feel so confident that I am in the place I'm supposed to be. It is uncertain. I'm learning to become more comfortable with being uncertain. I'm definitely getting even better at being uncomfortable. There are a lot of things I'm doing that I've never done before. I can't get over the things that like the people that I'm working with now. Again, I just like, if you had told Lindsay 3 years ago, she'd have been like, why would she be in that room? But I'm in the room now, and a totally different room. And I'm just like, oh yeah, no, I can do this. So but it's wobbly. My point was, it can be wobbly. You don't have to just be up and to the right. Like, yeah, I'm amazing. I can do everything. And every stage, I'm going to kill it. By the way, I've bombed a few times. And bombing, it's like, I get to bomb. First of all, I've never bombed before. It's okay. Like, I get to like go and have I did a talk where like right before I went on stage, I had did a sound check. I did all the tech stuff 3 hours ahead of time. I was so on top of it. I didn't want to do it right beforehand. And right before I walked on stage, the AV guy goes, oh God, I don't think your presentation's gonna work. It's like they were introducing me, and I was like, what's that? And he's like, yeah, I think it's maybe in the wrong order, or like, I'm not really sure, but like, flag me down if you need me. And they're like, and now Lindsay shookus. I was like, and by the way, it was a complete disaster. I mean, it was just, nothing was in the right order. It was like, I was talking about Peyton Manning, and I'm looking at a picture of Dwayne "The Rock" Johnson, and I think I'm talking about vulnerability, but all the stuff about adaptability it was a disaster. But again, a beautiful learning experience, because it really changed the way I prepared myself from there on out, because I was like, well, if that's going to happen again, how am I going to be comfortable? What am I going to do?
Totally. How do I get better?
How do I get better? Yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah. Okay, Lindsay. I mean, so many nuggets of wisdom. I feel like we could do a podcast on different topics that we covered on each of these. I could talk to you all day, and I'm lucky enough that I get to for a few days coming up here.
So exciting.
I'm so excited. I'm so grateful that you did this. We pulled it off. I didn't think we were going to pull this off.
I didn't either. I got to be honest. I was really like, the universe is telling us to wait another day, but we did it. We're here. We did it. And wouldn't it be great if this wasn't recorded?
Oh my God.
What if I was just
the thought has crossed my mind. The thought has crossed my mind of, we're going to get all the way to the end of this, and it's going to be like, burr, burr.
Yeah, sure. You did it. Yeah, you guys did it.
Oh my God. Well, I'm grateful for you, new friend.
Yeah, and I'm grateful for you.
And I can't wait to continue to get to know you, and to meet Maddie and your fiance, and to continue to support your work. I did pitch you to the Conference for Women, so just FYI.
Yes, I love it. I love it. Thank you.
Coming to a stage near you, people. Anything that you want to leave with our listeners in terms of any resources or anything that they can go to check out and learn more, either about your speaking or about Women Work Fucking Hard?
You can go to our website and sign up for to be part of our community at www.sh.community, and find us on Instagram. Find me on Instagram. I'm actually one of those people who like responds to people. Although I have to tell you, I did start my morning by looking on Instagram today, and I had reposted something, and it had a picture of me in the repost, and I opened it, and the comment was it just said "ugly bitch."
Oh.
And it was like 7 a.m. pre-coffee, and I was like, well, good morning. Good morning. So if you
that just means you made it, Lindsay. That just means you made it.
I made it. I also was once told that I looked like I had a horse face, so I find that to be or no. Someone said someone get a carrot for horse face shookus, which I was like, you gotta give him points for creativity. That is just truly
I did
awesome.
used to get called Mr. Ed because my teeth were so big. So maybe we have that.
Yeah, maybe that's our thing.
Maybe
that's
we're horse
like
sisters.
Yeah. Well, yeah, but you can find me on Instagram. As long as you don't call me an ugly bitch, I typically respond.
All right. Well, I think you're stunning inside and out, and especially today.
Thanks, girl.
All right. Well, I will see you soon. I can't wait.
Thank you so much. Thanks for having me.
I'm grateful, babe. Thank y'all for listening today. If you're so inclined, please follow, subscribe, download, share, all of the things so that we can keep going. We appreciate your support so much. If you're interested in learning more, go to thecoeffect.co.